Welcome to the Power Hour, Optometry's biggest and longest running show, now in its 13th season. I'm your host, Eugene Shatsman, and today's episode is a little bit different, but in the best way possible. So I recorded two conversations live from New York at Vision Expo East in February, both centered around innovations designed to make your practice more efficient. It is no secret that staffing is one of the biggest problems practices face today, and it's also no secret that we have to find ways to run an efficient operation as economic uncertainty continues to plague the industry. So first, we dive into an intensive interview with Barti. They're an up-and-coming company that's taking a completely fresh approach to EHR and technology integration. Then we sit down with a company called Teem. It's a team that's helping practices rethink staffing and administrative support in a way that boosts revenue and reduces burnout. So both companies are trying to answer the same big question from totally different angles. How do we make practices more efficient in today's environment? So before we dive into the interviews, quick reminder, if you have any questions, comments, or ideas for future episodes, head to eugeneshatsman.com or the Power Hour website, drop me a note, and don't forget to subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get to shows. So let's jump into today's special episode and talk about our first innovator. So our first conversation is with Barti. So this is a company that's making some waves by rethinking what EHR is supposed to do and how AI is supposed to support the daily practice flow. We talk about how small practices, and honestly, I think this can apply to all practices of any size, how they can leverage better tools to save time, improve patient communication, and even create a better in-room patient experience. And this is all without making things more complicated for the staff. So we also dig into why optometry software has historically lagged behind other fields and how AI is finally starting to change that. And really what the next 12 months might look like if practices embrace some of these new innovations that are coming down the pike. So here's my conversation live from New York with the team at Barti.
Hi, guys. Welcome to the Power Hour. Excited to have you on the show.
We're super excited to be here.
Thanks so much for having us.
Yeah, so I think we should get right into it. And maybe because we're talking about technology and we're here at Vision Expo, and there's so much innovation going on at Vision Expo. And I think the premise of the conversation I wanted to have today is the perspective on technology and innovation from your vantage point as a practice owner, and specifically a smaller practice owner, and then perspective on the industry and innovation from your vantage point as a service provider to the industry. So maybe let's just start with a little bit of context. Tell me a little bit about your practice and tell me what you're seeing in your practice.
Okay, so I have a very small practice with just myself as the doctor, tech, scribe, everything. So I see the patient from the moment they get into the office to the time they leave. So I have to make sure that everything that I have is up to date and full of technology so I can provide efficient services for my patients.
Okay, so let's just really quickly, how small? Because I think, you do a lot of different things, and I know you're also a social media influencer and that kind of stuff. We're going to talk a little bit about that momentarily, but let's talk about how many patients are you seeing and, how many patients a week type of thing.
So literally, I have one exam lane. That's all I have. I don't even have a pre-test room, just one exam lane. I see patients 2 to 3 days a week. That's within a 4 to 5 hour time span slot. So roughly 10 patients a day if my books get filled and they show up.
Right. Got it. And how many staff do you have supporting you?
Well, it could be anywhere from 2 to 4 if they all show up, but they're not supporting me per se. They're supporting the retail side of the optical.
Got it. Okay, so this is important because we're going to come back to the way that your practice flow goes. So what are some of, in your practice, thinking about that kind of a little bit more of a concierge experience for the patient, but also what are some of the challenges that you've encountered as did you start this practice? Did you buy it?
I just leased it. The other doctor left and they were kind of like out of a doctor for a while. And then I just randomly submitted an application on LinkedIn. And next thing I know, I'm on an interview and that got accepted. So it was pretty amazing.
Okay. So then you've got, as you've started this, as you kind of ventured into this practice and you're here, what are some of the challenges that you've experienced as you jumped into this world?
Well, the biggest challenge is getting patients in the door. So, the retail itself, they've been there for over 20 years. So we do get patients to that channel. However, patients don't always show up to their appointments,
right,
even with a reminder. So that is the biggest challenge, is getting them just in the door and showing up for the exams.
Got it. And then once they're there for the exam, what is the flow like, and what are some of the areas where you found yourself needing some support?
Not anymore. So I'm quite efficient at this time, thanks to Barti, making my life so much easier going from paper chart into EHR. So like I said, the whole process is very simple, very efficient. I can do the full exam, probably within 10 to 15 minutes, even with dilation. So I can get pretty quick here.
Yeah. So that's, and I think thinking about what happens after the exam, obviously, one of the key goals is to capture the patient in terms of on an optical sale, or you mentioned you have some specialty services as well that you provide. So talk a little bit about that. How do you hand off, and how do you get the patient into a direction where there's a treatment plan that's accepted?
So based on what I'm seeing during the exam, I usually offer the treatment plan right then and there. So that way they understand what to expect from here, point A to point B. And then I walk them out with the prescription in hand, and I hand them off to the staff and say, this is what I would recommend for this patient. And these are the different options that they need. So sometimes it's more than just one pair of glasses that I have to make sure that the staff understands. And that's how the trade-off is before I grab the next patients.
Got it. Great. Okay. So how does this compare to some of the industry stuff, Colton, that you're seeing? And really, what are some of the challenges that you're hearing from other providers, small and large, in the industry?
Yeah, I think this echoes what we see a lot, which is providers are struggling to do it all and to make all the systems work in symphony, getting patients in the door through the text message reminders that need to sync with their appointment scheduling. So the big problem we see in the industry is the typical practice has 10 different point solutions, 10 different things for software that don't talk to each other. Mm-hmm. So data is all spread out. The other hot take I have in the industry is eye doctors have some of the worst software in healthcare across anywhere in medicine.
I agree.
And it is unfortunate, because we're way behind dentistry, for example, when it's coming to adoption of AI tools, or even frankly, basic things like, are you doing text message reminders for your appointments? Are you letting patients book online? You'd be shocked how few optometry practices I talk to that have a digital intake form. Mm-hmm. Most people are still doing paper. And that's very, very common. So as an industry, that's a challenge, because these software tools are what's going to help solve some of the problems getting patients in the door and making operational efficiency better.
Right. So, and there's a lot, it almost seems like we're here at Vision Expo, and it almost seems like everywhere you go to like a nutraceuticals booth and they're like, now with AI. So it seems like AI is definitely the buzz here at Vision Expo. And, as I frequently lecture on AI related topics, but from your vantage point, both of you, and maybe Colton, start, tell us a little bit of what you're seeing from an AI adoption perspective, and also where are the AI opportunities in the industry?
Absolutely. So it's one of our favorite topics. We've had our AI Scribe live in the market for about a year now. I joked a year ago, everyone was talking about AI. Really was us and Altris AI were the only software companies that actually had something in use. Now, like you said, it's all over the place, which is exciting. And it's awesome. We're seeing more AI Scribes. We're seeing it in the refractive equipment. We're seeing it on the diagnostic side. What I'm most excited about, people don't talk about, is that it's lowering the cost to launch new technologies. So that we're seeing a burst of innovation. We're going to see a lot more, especially on the software side, more companies than we've ever seen before. Barti is one of the only software companies in the last 10 years of any kind of software in the industry. Now we're going to start seeing way more companies launch, because AI has made it easier to build software to launch new products.
Right. So what are some examples of where there's like a before and after type of thing? And maybe your practice too. Like, what was it like before? And then was it like after using some of the AI?
Oh, yeah. So even just with the two-way text messaging, it makes it so much easier for patients just to text me back and say, oh, I can't make it to that appointment. Can I reschedule? Then I'm following up with them through texting versus having to pick up the phone, calling them. I think that's kind of inconvenient. I mean, for me, I prefer texting.
Yeah, 100%. Now, does the AI text the patients back too? Can it?
So we are just in beta now with something like that. Yeah, our Office Companion that can do phone calls or text messages as well.
That's neat.
Yeah, and so really that whole thing should be on autopilot. My view is the patient, the before is the staff has to call. They have to manually get the insurance card info. They have to manually go pull the insurance benefits, soon in Barti, all of that will be on autopilot with it.
Well, and actually, let's go back and describe these 10 pieces of software that we think are present in most practices. And, this way the audience can kind of connect and understand what the heck we're talking about. So maybe let's list them a little bit. Maybe you can tell me if that resonates with you, Dr. Quinn.
Yeah. So the typical practice today, they're using at least something for their charts, either paper or an EHR. Sometimes they have a separate practice management system for their actual scheduling and inventory management. Then they have a separate texting system just to send appointment reminders. They have a separate phone system, VIOP, to actually answer phone calls. None of that's connected. Then they might have a separate system for reporting and analytics to be able to get the data that they need out of their practice. Then they might have an intake form solution, something like intake queue or jot form so patients don't have that paper. There's
machine.
The fax machine. We do e-fax. Fax machine is unfortunately still a thing that many people need to have. So
actually, somebody did ask me to fax something recently, and I was like, is that really something we still use? Like, I don't know how to send a fax anymore.
Ophthalmology office as well as primary care. So you'd be amazed.
Well, and, we get faxes sometimes asking for prescriptions from third-party people trying to sell our patient stuff, right?
And even now that they have the e-pharmacy, we can do the scripts online too.
Yeah. Okay. So then you take all these pieces of technology and you say, okay, how can we layer a different piece of technology can do all of those things, but then also the AI piece. I still want to dig a little bit deeper. So what does the AI do?
Yeah. So the flagship thing that I think other systems now have, and the number one thing that doctors love about AI is the AI scribe. And actually, whether it's optometry or other parts of medicine, it's the number one cause of burnout among doctors is the documentation. Because 50% of a doctor's day is documentation, charting, clicking, typing.
Yes.
The scribe saves up to 1 to 2 hours per day on average. And they've shown that in peer-reviewed clinical studies.
Well, and it's not just the saves the time, it also enhances the patient experience, right?
Yes.
So you go into a patient room, you are looking at a patient now most of the time. You're not turning to the computer and typing, right? So what does that do for your patient experience?
They love it because I can just do more education, because when you educate, guess what? They buy.
Right. Well, that's an interesting point, is that so then you get into education about your what we'll call specialty services.
Correct.
With the time that you would have been turned with your back to the patient, typing stuff in.
Exactly.
I think you nailed it. Patients prefer it. We've all had that experience of going into the doctor and their back is turned to you, like you said. And actually, by the way, the notes are more accurate and more comprehensive.
Oh, sure.
And instead of just
legible
doing the bare and legible, instead of doing the bare minimum, a lot of it's going to be more detailed.
Sure. I totally agree. So now let's go to your practice. Now, it's interesting to me, and I want to hit on this a little bit. You are a little bit of a social media personality. Can you talk a little bit how you got into that and what your experience with that has been?
Yeah, like 8 years ago, I got a little bit of a burnt out. So I decided to join a skincare direct company, and they taught me how to personally brand myself. Funny thing is, I started doing it for skincare, but then eye care is a small community. So the next thing you know, all these different people started following me in the eye care industry. Then COVID hit just about 2 or 3 years in. And then I started getting asked to join podcasts to help them train their staff how to utilize social media. So just from then on, I've now collaborated with different brands and companies over the years just to promote their business to help independent optometrists be more efficient in their area.
So when you're training people to be good at social media and how to kind of position themselves well on social media, what are the kinds of things that you're teaching people, and what are the kinds of kind of fun tips that you can give some members of the audience?
Sure. So one thing is be genuine. They can definitely tell when you're fake. Be super authentic, even if it's silly, because somebody can relate to that. Try to keep politics out of what you're posting.
Yep.
Nobody wants to hear that over and over. That's what the news are for. The other thing is brand yourself so that you stand out from somebody else in the industry. So for me, it's my colorful hairstyle, because everyone can spot me, even with a mask on. if I walk these halls because I'm probably the only Asian doctor with this many colors in their hair.
Okay. And so this is a plug for our YouTube channel because obviously, if you're listening to this, you don't see Dr. Nguyen's very colorful hairstyle. But if you went on YouTube, you'd be able to see it. Now, with that in mind, okay, so you're talking about being authentic, but what if a doctor's like, but I don't want my personal life on display, right? Like I don't want my kids, I don't want to be doing TikTok dances. So what do you do?
So you don't have to put your family there. I try to protect my family on social media, so I try not to include them or mention their names or where they go to school. But what they can do is show what their practice offers, and they can still make unique videos to share that without having to do any dancing if they don't want to do it, because their staff can also do it.
You make the delegate the dancing, double delegation.
Definitely.
Okay, so what are some of the most popular pieces of content that you've created that are that are really interesting to people?
The most common one they're different on different platforms, but astigmatism is like the most. I get the most hits on that video. Everyone wants to know what astigmatism is and how they can view it and what can be fixed. So I think I listed like 6 ways to tell if you have astigmatism. The other one is about eye herpes of the eyes. That video also get a lot of hit. You'd be amazed how many people ask me questions, follow up on that.
Well, what's funny is that that's not a topic that people feel super comfortable talking to each other about. So that's where they might turn to social media to do a little bit of research. And that's where it kind of makes perfect sense. I get it.
I didn't do a dance. All I did was explain what can happen. And I pointed to different words that, can show up in the eyes with that. And again, they'll all get a lot of follow-up questions.
Yeah. So and just quantify for us, what's your social media volume? Like how any idea?
I think on LinkedIn alone is over 35,000.
Wow.
It's the most followers I have is on.
I'm sitting next to a celebrity here.
Yeah, no, it's for sure. Yeah. Do you give out autographs?
Yeah. I need her training on social media too. I have a goal. You'd be proud of me this year. I have a goal to post on LinkedIn at least once a month.
Oh,
at least once a month.
I'm not sure she would be proud of you. I think she would say you need to do a little bit more.
Numbers.
Yeah.
at least 2 to 3 times a week. Yeah. Because if your face isn't there, people won't recognize you. And I think that's why so many people recognize me when I walk down those aisles, because I post almost every day. Yeah. Almost every day.
Well, and what's interesting from that vantage point is that you're posting, but you're also posting something that's relevant. Correct. Because I think people get tired when people are saying the same thing over and over and over again. So how do you keep it relevant?
So that's why you have to stay active. You have to see what's available in the industry by attending these trade shows, speaking out, and just seeing what's out there and reading news articles and as well as reading our newsletters in the eye industry just to make sure.
Well, what I think I've seen that's worked well is that kind of that, to your point on authenticity, is that it's not necessarily the fact that you have to be an expert in everything. Correct. It's the authenticity piece is that, here's something I saw, here's something I learned about, and I'm still trying to figure it out, but here's my journey through that.
So that's why I attend these trade shows, and I give pretty much free promotion for any brand that catches my eye. And I would promote them and without charging them. But for the most part, there will be a fee.
Okay, you might get some phone calls after this because if you're saying, "Oh, yeah, free promotion, 35,000 people," I'm telling you, it's the best deal, guys. Right. She's willing to do it for free. I'm kidding. All right, so back to doctors and back to what doctors need in their practice. Colton, I want to kind of give you the floor a little bit to talk about some of the innovations that need to be in place in a typical eye care practice. Now, we already talked about the AI scribe. I think I think everybody realizes that if you have a scribe, you're more efficient. If you have an ambient scribe, like the fact that somebody's taking notes for you while you're talking to the patient, assuming you can trust it, that's a great innovation. Give me a couple more innovations that make sense in a practice.
Totally. So there's 2 table stakes things that I don't see very often that every practice should have. So one is reputation management. Most patients are going to see your Google Maps reviews. That's how patients are deciding whether or not to come to your practice. So just having an automatic text message that says, "Hey, did you have a good experience? Click here to rate us 5 stars." Shockingly few of our people we talk to are either doing that or interested in that. So that's got to be table stakes. You need to have 3, triple digit 5-star Google Maps reviews. Otherwise, you're going to be losing the bat. The other one that, we see is automated medical, is eligibility for insurance. So not every optometrist takes medical insurance, although I would argue a lot more should do. If you do, though, a lot of them don't actually do the eligibility properly. They don't know what the patient's deductible is, and their staff is doing it super manually. They're logging into each portal one at a time to see, does this patient have a copay? So there's systems now that are, this isn't AI. This has been out for a while that can do that automatically.
Yep.
That's another table stakes thing that if you're in practice, you want to save time, you take insurance, you got to have that in place.
Right. And I think that whether you're active in terms of medical or just kind of dabbling, I think, a lot of conversations I've had with podcast guests have to do with the fact that we need to find ways to, number one, drive revenue, number two, be more efficient. And more efficient with our staff's time. So there's this principle of burnout has become a constant discussion point within practices, and whether it's practice owners, practice managers, and even staff, frontline staff are constantly feel like they're being asked to do more, and they don't necessarily have the time or, kind of patience to tolerate it. So we see high levels of turnover, and it seems to me like technology is doing a really good job of posing solutions, but practices are doing not such a great job of integrating some of those solutions. So maybe, Dr. Nguyen, talk about your experience of integrating solutions into your practice. Is it hard to install new software? Is it hard to train people on new technology?
It was just me. So I'm very tech savvy. So I'm going to say no. I have a very low learning curve. So I learn pretty quickly on the go. So with Barti, when I joined, I literally learned within a few hours, and I was like up and going.
Right. Okay. So what's your experience?
I think that every technology company faces a similar challenge, which is we're really in the business of change management. We're not in the business of technology or software, because there's this great video I talk about all the time. You should go look it up. Someone's trying to give away an ounce of gold. It's a gold bar, mini gold bar in Times Square, and they can't give it away. It's like $1,600, $2,000 of value. And I think about that video all the time, because you could literally be giving someone pure gold, and they're going to pass by you. They're not even going to give you the time of day because they have some other priority. They have an emergency. They're busy. They're afraid you're not legit. They're disingenuous. So that is the biggest challenge, is the psychology of my staff is going to kill me because they don't want to learn something new. And then the other piece is just change in general is very hard. So what we try to stress is always, we make it easy. Of course, no one also believes that, because everyone says that. So luckily, our strategy is we just have to rely on doctors' testimonials to say, actually, it was easy. It actually wasn't that bad. But really, all the software companies, all the technology companies here, that's the hardest challenge, is getting people to care, and helping them understand that people are so busy, they won't even think about the software that will help make them less busy.
So does the guy in Times Square actually, I've never seen the video, does the guy actually give away the gold?
He eventually gives it away.
I would have taken it.
I now need to see it. We're going to put the link in the video in the show notes. It's the most important thing. But it makes a really good point, is that if you don't trust, and I think about it from the consumer psychology standpoint, because we're all consumers, right? Whether you're trying to talk to doctors or you're trying to talk to patients, all of us have a consumer mindset, and the consumer psychology is that if it doesn't fit into a box that I already have, right? So when I'm walking through Times Square, there's the Elmo who's going to hug me and is going to charge me $2 for the hug or whatever, or for a picture. There's the vendors, there's the busy people who I don't, who are trying to avoid running into me. And all of those people fit into a box, right? Kind of this mental construct that I already have and an expectation. So anytime you have something new, it doesn't necessarily fit into that box. And so it makes perfect sense that a guy who is trying to gift a $1,600 thing for no good reason does not fit into that box. So I get it, from a technology standpoint. But I also, in talking to a lot of doctors at the show, and also for my own lectures, I kind of find that we have an industry right now that's a little bit more open-minded, because we recognize that our relationship with technology and also our consumers' relationship with information, given all the AI innovations, is continuing to change. So, adapting to that is really, really important.
So I'm really encouraged by that. So we're seeing doctors adopt technology now faster than ever before. And again, AI is a big part of that. There's a study from the American Medical Association. Last year, a third of doctors said they used AI. This year, 2/3 of doctors. So it doubled from 1/3 to 2/3 of doctors now use AI. That's incredible.
Yeah.
If you look at AI Scribe, which I talked about before, that's in every part of medicine now, and it's remarkable because it took EMRs now 20 years to become widespread. There are literally still hospitals that just recently got an EMR in the last few years. It took 20 years for that technology to really get distributed. AI Scribe, in 12 to 18 months, every hospital now in the US has that technology.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. Now, what other technologies do you think are at the forefront? What's coming next?
So the hottest thing for sure now is voice agents and conversational AI to be able to answer the phone, book an appointment. And to your point, and that's where like a one-woman army like Dr. Nguyen is so powerful. She probably can't get to the phone all the time or anyone.
I don't answer the phone.
Yeah. And honestly, even when people who have a big staff, they're helping the patient checkout class.
Well, and the data that I have shows that out of tens of thousands of phone calls that our organization has listened to, that about 25 to 27% of those phone calls go completely unanswered. And those are patient opportunities. Those are
literally
literally calling to try to get on your schedule so that they can give you money. But, oftentimes we're not available to take advantage of those opportunities. So one of the things that I've seen, and I'm not sure what your experience with this technology has been, is that, and I saw something demoed literally at the show, and it still feels a little bit difficult to kind of communicate with. The latency time, I know, is kind of the big trick, right? The latency is that if I say, hi, my name is Eugene, I'd like to schedule an appointment, awkward pause. And then great, here to help, and like whatever. And so I think we've solved a little bit for the genuineness sounding of the AI. Like it's conversational sounding, and it's less robotic. It feels like you can get it to sound like a person.
Yeah.
But what about the latency? How is that getting solved?
It is going to be solved in the next 6 months.
Do you think so?
Cutting edge startup, that latency, just like the other parts of AI, are improving exponentially. People mention that, but we need to talk about it more. AI really is bending the exponential curve, meaning if it's pretty good now, in a year and 2 years, it's going to be indistinguishable, I think, from a human. If you guys are you staying at the Hyatt? If you haven't, I would encourage you to call their main phone number on their Google Maps here. Their AI is really good. It is really, it's right on that cusp. But you're right. It's still not there, but it is really good. And it's way better than it was a year ago, which means 12 months from now, it's going to be, you won't be able to tell.
Interesting. So yeah, and I think I've played around enough with it that we actually have tested chatbots on websites, and the chatbots on websites versus human services that provide chat services on websites. And what we found is that the chatbots can actually, if programmed correctly with the right prompts and for the right, they can out convert, meaning turn more visitors to the website into patients, and all the above. So that's kind of interesting. I think that's an interesting shift, because consumers are now expecting to communicate with AI more often, which is then making it feel less disingenuous. And, to bring it back to something you said earlier, is then the in-person interaction with the patient is more authentic because you have more time to focus on the in-person interaction, right?
That's absolutely correct.
I think the end user expectations are also changing, because most people I know say, I don't want to talk to an AI, because everyone has that experience of a dumb AI phone tree where you're just like, agent, just put me through. Yeah. Now, though, people are like, I'd actually rather talk to the AI, because sometimes I can get it faster, or it's actually easier, in certain cases, or at least it answers 100% of the time. We're calling practices all the time. I'm not surprised about that 20 to 25% number. That's That's insane, though.
Yeah, it's a lot of opportunity that's missed. But you're absolutely right, is that once a consumer finds the AI helpful, our minds shift. And, I personally remember 20 years ago calling phone trees where it's supposed to do voice recognition. You're just getting more and more frustrated and screaming, hey, agent, come on, help me, help, operator. Right. Whatever you need to say to just give me to a real person. But you're absolutely right, is that if that now I can say my thing, and like I don't even have to talk to a person. I can get it done faster, and the AI is helpful, whatever reason I'm calling for. You're absolutely right. I think that there's there's less hesitation for a person to say, okay, I don't really need to worry about it.
Yeah. It's a huge problem. I'll just say, I used to be a management consultant, and one of my clients was a huge pizza company. and they're a national pizza company. They miss 10% of their phone calls. So it's a huge problem for basically every business.
Right.
But especially for
It's pizza, like I want it now.
I'm literally calling to give you my credit card number.
Right.
I didn't answer the phone.
Right.
So similar here. It's like, I'm calling to make an appointment. That is money on the table. And of course, then you get into what my vision for AI is, and I think where this is going.
Yep.
If you look at the most recent thing, the ChatGPT release, it's a full desktop agent. It can just work any app on your computer and do anything, almost anything that you instruct it to do. What does that mean? That means I think in 2 to 3 years, you will have a AI assistant in your office that will literally be Jarvis from Iron Man, and you can ask it to do any administrative task and it will do it. It will be like a virtual assistant, but it's an AI that always shows up, is there 24/7. It can call any patient, answer any question for a patient, do the billing, insurance stuff, almost anything that a VA can do.
I think this is where pre-education before the doctor walks in the room comes in. This is where hyper qualifying patients by need, by condition becomes basically hyper personalization of messaging and conversation with patients. Because right now, just imagine a typical doctor's office. You walk in, the same brochures if I'm sitting there waiting for the doctor, the same brochures are sitting on the table for me, and then the patient after me, and the patient before me, and the patient before me might have been a kid, and the patient after me might be some patient with macular degeneration, and we're seeing the same stuff, the same materials, the same stuff, the same messaging before we actually see the doctor. And maybe that'll change. Maybe we'll have messaging that is more tailored to serve us.
I sure hope so, because that would be great for like bigger, larger practices that has more than one specialty. So,
and I'm also very passionate as a patient about what you mentioned about patient education, Dr. Wen, because my other hot take is there is basically zero patient education in this industry or generally in healthcare. Most patients forget everything you said the second they walk out the door. And honestly, a very small proportion of practices we see even send any kind of follow-up, like, here's the condition we talked about, here's some things you should read and think about. Almost none of that. So I love that idea of both doing it in the exam room after with the more time you have and much more personalized.
Right. So it's about, I think, we're talking about technology as a source of, number one, saving time. Number two, preventing staff friction, burnouts, frustration, that kind of stuff, and doctor frustration and friction as well. And then number three, we're talking about potentially driving revenue. And one of the ways you drive revenue is by creating a more aware patient, and then also by driving by giving the doctor more time to have high value conversations with the patient.
Once you educate them about their eyes, why they need certain features in the eyewear, then they're more willing to go out there to purchase specific eyewear for whatever occupation or hobbies that we're recommending it for. So sometimes they're getting like 2 or 3 multiple pairs.
Right. So now, Colton, I want to turn to, obviously, we're standing in the Barti booth, and you have been exhibiting here, and you're getting some sort of feedback from doctors. So tell me what you're hearing on the show floor, and really what kind of feedback that the industry is giving you on some of the products you guys have.
So I would say my favorite reaction yesterday, Dat and Aaron from ODs on finance, we did a demo of the AI Scribe, and it was like a wow moment. They literally was like, wow, it fills out all the boxes exactly as it's supposed to, saving tons of time. The other exciting thing we've been getting a great reaction from is the AI history. So we're talking about personalization and hyper-personalization. The other dirty secret is, this isn't just true for optometrists, a lot of doctors don't look at all your records before you walk in, especially if you're a long-time patient. They're not going to look at 10 or 15 years worth of records.
Right.
What we can do now for the doctor is make it as if they had all that time to review 10 years of records by asking any question and immediately getting the summarized answers. You say, tell me every brand of contact lens this patient has tried over the last 5 years. How has their vision evolved over time? What kinds of glasses do they like to buy? And it will pull 10 years worth of data.
So do I prompt that?
You prompt it, and you can have, exactly.
I type it into my computer.
I used that a few days ago. I had a patient who was seen back for multiple times for an IOP check.
Yeah.
And I say IOP history, and it listed the dates and the IOP history in just a few seconds.
So imagine ChatGPT had access to all of your patient records in a HIPAA compliant way that just self-contained it, but you can ask it any question and it can reference all that data.
That's awesome. And, what's interesting is that I can see that going into a different direction of, okay, if you have multiple providers in a practice, you could study the differences between, treatment protocols and treatment effectiveness and revenue per patient and those types of things and really, rather than just look at the numbers, you can actually look at the data behind the numbers and can maybe query the chat GPT / whatever the assistant to say, okay, well, why is revenue per patient lower for this particular doctor? Is it that we have fewer lenses sold, or is this doctor selling fewer educating patients on fewer dry eye or myopia treatments and that kind of thing? So we could get into that relatively easily, I think, and then you could go even deeper and say, well, why and what particular type of patient cohort maybe is this doctor seeing versus that doctor, and that sort of thing.
I love where your head is going. Obviously, you're very data driven, and the power practice in general as well. The possibilities are endless. We can't even really understand, but once we're able to really harmonize AI with all the data, it can give you anything about your practice. It can say, here's the scheduling slots you should change to make sure your schedule's full. Here's the prices you need to adjust that you're leaving money on the table, low-hanging fruit. Medicare adjusted, you haven't updated your prices for 3 years. Medicare's going to give you more or less money here. All of that will be way more easily accessible once you're able to put the AI into Algebra.
Yeah, and I think that's where that exponential curve that you're talking about is headed, because as soon as one company has that innovation, the other companies are going to catch up and beat out that innovation and say, this is the next thing, this is the next frontier. And I love that about the situation that we're in now, because it's not as hard to build. We have AI an AI team that works for our organization, and that there's 7 people who are constantly plugging away at building AI innovations. But that team doesn't necessarily require hardcore developers. They are essentially, in many ways, prompt engineers to use the AI to make the AI better. So I see this as one of those things where it's AI enabled innovation too.
Yes, yeah, and I think that's what gets me excited, because we can give superpowers to practice owners where you don't have time. You're not a full-time data analyst. You're not, even the ones who are data driven, you're not really spending that much time looking at all the nitty gritty. We can just surface all that immediately.
Right.
And I think that's where the possibilities get exciting.
All right. So I think this is where I'll pause the conversation for now. I'm excited to see what's on the forefront, and it's awesome to see things through each of your lenses, right? As a smaller practice owner, and at the same time, a big time influencer, and then also as a key industry vendor and as somebody who is bringing something innovative to the marketplace. It's good to pause here at Vision Expo and say, okay, this is where we're at exactly at this time in 2025. I wonder where we'll be a year from now. Thank you both for joining the show.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
All right, let's dive into our second conversation with Teem. Teem is taking a completely different angle on practice efficiency. They are helping practices hire trained remote team members that can take tasks like scribing, insurance verification, front desk support, and even billing off of your plate. So I challenge these guys to think a little bit about how practices are using remote staff to free up their in-office teams, but also the model is kind of evolving. And how does the model solve real staffing challenges and impacting practices in a profitable way? So we'll break down the numbers, what it costs, what it saves, how to get started. Basically, this is as if you stepped into the Teem booth and asked all of these questions yourself. And I tried to keep it as focused as possible on things that can truly help the practice. Enjoy.
All right. Welcome to the Orlando Innovator Series. We're here at Vision Expo, and I'm interviewing Trevor from Teem. Now, Trevor, I've heard a lot of talk about Teem, and I'm just curious, what kind of innovations are you showcasing here at Expo today?
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Our innovations are we hire virtual assistants. So we essentially set optometry practices up with a remote employee. They live in South America. It's a good way to be able to, with the rising costs in the industry, to help save money while boosting optometry offices' revenue. So they're able to do things in the office to help alleviate stress and help those offices.
And with the technology connection that everybody has now, it's not hard to imagine someone doing something remotely. But I'm going to ask you the obvious question that probably everybody's thinking is that, well, these people are in South America. How much could they possibly know about my practice?
So a lot of them don't know much. It's like you're hiring a domestic employee, a lot of them don't have experience. They have a medical background, not predominantly in optometry, just because in South America, it's so different. It's similar, but different on the way they do things, rules, regulations, and things like that. So what we do is we work with universities to bring people with medical backgrounds
Nice.
that are easy for them to train. So we work with a number of U.S. universities, BYU out of Utah being the biggest one, to help bring those top quality candidates to the optometry.
Wait, so what does BYU do for you guys? How does that help with the folks in South America?
So they have what's called an international pathway program.
Okay.
Where they have students that are able to get a U.S. education that in then turns bring some strong soft skills to the industry. They're able, fewer accent, a lot more knowledgeable, dedicated individuals that are then able to help. So they essentially send us candidates as well as other avenues, and then we vet them, and then we bring them to optometry practices to interview.
Okay, so let's go through this one more time. So
Yeah.
BYU brings these people here, and then, or are they doing this remotely?
They're doing it remotely.
That's awesome.
So they live in South America. They're just getting a degree through BYU and other U.S. universities.
Got it. So, but which is fascinating because they're now getting this degree remotely, and they're also going to be doing their job remotely. So
Correct.
This is already kind of a qualification of skill to some extent. Okay, so all right, so these people are in South America. Now, you mentioned it, the accent component. So what are these virtual assistants doing for practices, and where are you seeing the most amount of success? What's the feedback you're hearing?
Yeah, great question. The top 3 areas that they're able to help optometry practices with, scribing being number 1. We ran a lot of data on this where doctors are able to boost revenue by 20% just by having a virtual scribe. Mainly equate that to they're able to see 3 to 5 new patients a day because they're not spending an hour and a half on average entering all the notes into their EHR system. They're having someone remotely do that for them. So they're essentially listening in to the doctor, entering those notes.
Okay, but you're going to have to talk me through it like I'm 5, because I'm not sure how a person in South America is going to be in the same room that the doctor is when they're seeing the patient. What technology are you using?
Yeah, so great question. So use iPads or some sort of tablet.
Okay.
So we set them up with a VPN.
Okay.
It's able to securely remote them into the EHR system.
Okay.
So the doctor would have a tablet. They would then take that from exam room to exam room. The person is on a Zoom meeting or a Microsoft Teams or a Google Meet, and they're able to just put themselves on mute. The doctor basically puts them up on like a stand. They're able to then listen in and hear the doctor say things out loud and then enter it into the EHR. So all the doctor needs is a tablet and just take them from room to room. The scribe would then enter everything in.
And the scribe has the patient record pulled up on their side.
Yep.
And how do they know which patient we're seeing?
So the doctor and then would talk before each one, just brief them on it and say, hey, we're going to see Susie or we're going to
we're going to see Susie Jones. She, birthday 7/25, whatever.
Yep.
Got it. And then the scribe pulls up the patient. And does the patient ever see the scribe?
Some doctors allow them to see the scribe and say, hey, this is so-and-so. They're going to be scribing for me. Some don't. We leave that up to the doctor and that kind of patient relationship.
I've actually heard, and we have some clients that use remote scribes, and I've actually heard that sometimes it actually kind of enhances the patient relationship because the doctor will say something like, hey, this is Jenna. She's taking notes for me today so that I can spend more time focusing on you.
Yep.
Say hi to Jenna, and then the patient will wave hi, and then they kind of feel like, oh, it's a good, it's a good experience. And the doctor, elegantly said, there's a patient benefit to this. I'm not just doing this for my own efficiency. I'm actually doing this so I can spend more time focusing on you, the patient.
Correct.
Yep. Now, it was a really interesting stat. You said, how many more patients can I see in a day if I'm using a scribe?
3 to 5 new patients a day.
Okay. And just as I'm doing the math for the audience, those 3 to 5 new patients or 3 to 5 patients per day, let's just call it 4.
Yep.
4 patients, average revenue per patient of $300. So we're going to call it $1,200 in revenue. What does this cost me?
So this only costs about 10, depending on different partnerships that we have, it's only around $10 an hour to $12 an hour at the most.
Okay. So worst case scenario, I got an 8-hour day. It's going to cost me $100.
Yep.
Do I have to pay like employment taxes?
Nope.
Do I have wages? I have to do anything?
No, that's the beauty of it. So we take care of all the payroll tax, compliance, insurance, benefits. You guys just pay the hourly fee, which we break out to be a flat fee per month. And then we pay them and take care of it.
Right. So I got $100 a day, and I make an extra $1,200 at the same time. Obviously, I have some costs associated with that, but that's an interesting point because I also can see a world in which the doctor can spend more time doing additional patient education with the patients they're already seeing. Right. So instead of me saying, okay, I can see more patients and that's it, the benefit, but I'm also saying I can see more patients and I can spend more time talking about my dry eye program, for example, or I can see if you're a fit for the myopia management program and give you an extra 2 or 3 minutes on that to see if you would want to be able to come back for a full myopia workup. So I think there's certainly room there. Now you said that there's top 3. That was just one. Okay, what's the list? What are the other ones?
The other one would be front desk help. So we're seeing on average 30% of calls go unanswered in an optometry practice due to, offices are checking in outpatients. They're busy. They can't always get to the phone. Obviously, the in-person patients are the ones that matter the most at that time.
Well, because they're standing right in front of you.
Yep. So a virtual assistant's able to come in, help answer those phone calls so you don't lose revenue, upset patients who are calling in, sometimes alleviate a lot of that stress on the staff. Also do other administrative work within the front desk, like insurance verification, insurance reconciliation, admin tasks, and things like that would incorporate that front desk role.
Sure. I think that's great. Now, my other thought on that is that as you're thinking about the patient or the person answering the phone, from an accent standpoint, how much of an issue is that, and what feedback are you hearing on that side?
Yeah, great question. So the feedback we're hearing is it's minimal accent. Obviously, we can't erase the accent fully, but we do vet them, put them through a series of things. But typically, there's like a small Hispanic accent involved in it. But for the most part, we haven't heard any negative feedback from doctors on it being too much of an issue.
Yeah, no, and it makes sense. I think that is oftentimes the expectation. It's way better to answer the phone and maybe answer the phone with a light accent than it is to not answer the phone. But, I think that there's also an important message that you just gave, which is the concept of verifying insurance benefits, doing other administrative work. Now, again, how do you loop those people in? How do you get them to, how does a practice really train that person and say, that's the thing I need you to be doing? And how do they decide what they need that person to be doing?
Great question. A lot of offices, when we're talking with them, they know kind of the stresses of the office from the feedback from their own staff of like, hey, this is where we're struggling. This is where we need help. So we assign them a dedicated success manager. A lot of them are former office managers who know the ins and outs and are able to work with that office on, hey, you just told me these 3 things. Let's dive deeper into them. Maybe it's insurance. Maybe it's like, we can't answer the phones. Maybe it's this. And we'll dive deeper into that job description and really narrow it down. On the training piece, we can provide a HIPAA compliant Google Meet license, but a lot of offices already have a Zoom or a Microsoft Teams. That's a good way to train a remote employee because you can screen share with them. So it's almost like they're sitting over your shoulder. They can see your mouse move, et cetera, and then have that virtual assistant retrain them.
Yeah, and what I love about that is that you can actually record those meetings too. Yep. So then, the person isn't asking you questions over and over again. And as any employee really would as they're learning a job, they could probably just go back to that recording and say, "Oh yeah, that's where I can pick up that skill."
Yep, exactly.
What happens if a person doesn't work out?
If a person doesn't work out, there is no contract. It's month to month. Typically, we'll find someone to replace them through our pool of candidates. Typically is how we do it. Knock on wood, at Teem, we really pride ourselves in finding really dedicated employees and spend a lot of time vetting them. So we only have 3% of the people who have essentially not worked out.
Okay, so I think we covered 2.
Yes.
The remote scribe and front desk
Yeah.
help. What's the third one?
Third one would be revenue cycle management and billing.
Okay.
So that's kind of the third piece that we've seen offices use our virtual assistants for. That piece can be used in 1 to 2 locations. What we're seeing is more of like the bigger locations will use it, kind of offset some of that billing and help them with it, whether you bring it in-house or help it with outsourcing as well.
Yeah. And that's interesting because that is an area of opportunity. But again, that area of opportunity requires a healthy amount of training. Do you guys help with that?
Yeah. So if someone's going to do revenue cycle management, we have another piece that we call managed services, where we've hired corporate trainers and former billing and highly skilled insurance coordinators that would then manage their day-to-day and train them step by step.
Okay.
Obviously, the practice would need to show us or show them briefly how they do it, but they're able to pick it up and then train them and manage them and make sure it's done correctly.
Fantastic. So tell me a little bit about how a practice can get started or even test this out and see if this works in their practice.
Yeah, great question. So Hire Teem is our website, HIRETEEM.com. They can go on there, request what's called a discovery call. We would do a call and a deep dive with them to see kind of where the pain points are, where we could or couldn't potentially help them. Then from there, we would have them sign up and then meet with the success manager to dive deeper into what they look for personality-wise, what they look for experience, background. Maybe when they're hiring a domestic employee, then we can go from our candidates, do interviews 5 days later and have that team member starting with them. So typically it's a 3-week turnaround from the first discovery call to them hiring an employee.
That's an important point. So it takes 3 weeks to that employee starting?
Yes.
So today I could decide, and 3 weeks later I could have a position fill in my office and free up somebody else. I think this is an important opportunity to adapt to today's technology-driven environment, to think about how much, from a cost-saving standpoint, there's an opportunity to experiment with, and then also how much from a patient experience standpoint and a staff burnout situation, because I think all practices are all looking for solutions for this. So I think this is an interesting innovation, and I encourage our audience to give me some feedback if you have some experience with Teams so that we could share that with the rest of the listenership. Thank you so much for joining me, Trevor, and thank you so much for being on the show.
Thanks for listening to today's Power Hour episode. The Power Hour is actually owned by the Power Practice. Power Practice is a premier consulting group who helps practices achieve freedom of time, confidently solve practice issues, and grow their practices. They do this by having coaches and OD consultants, people who have actually done it, been there, and they're ready to help. If you want to learn more, go to powerpractice.com. There's a bunch of free tools there. You can also get a whole bunch of information and decide whether it's right for your practice. Again, if you're looking for more time, you're looking to solve complex practice issues or grow, the Power Practice might be right for you. Go to powerpractice.com to find out more.